racial equity. They didn't call it diversity, equity, and inclusion, and they didn't say DEI. They called it specifically what it was. Now I want you to think about that. Think about a foundation who shuffles millions of dollars in a community that's primarily white. Most of their $1 million checks come from primarily white people. And they're having to decide, we need to take a stand in our community about racial justice. And that was a challenging decision for them to make because of the very things I just told you, that fear, and are we going to lose donors, and all of the things that come with a nonprofit that's shuffling millions of dollars. Thank you for putting up with us for the sound check. We appreciate you. Welcome to Top Ranks Breaking Barriers DEI&B podcast. We are brought to you by our wonderful sponsors, Rise to Greatness, Community Savings Bank, Tyler Lincoln Barnes, I'm On Communications, Bankers Trust, and Inclusive ICR. So we want to thank our sponsors. I also want to give a special shout out to Tasha Laird and her team for putting where we are today live at the 2024 inaugural Empowerment Symposium in Iowa City, Iowa. We are coming to you from the Graduate Hotel. So thank you to Tasha.
You all can clap for that. Clap for that.
Beep, 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 beep. We got some breaking news. We are an award-winning podcast now.
Yes, we are pleased to say that we are the inaugural winners of the 2024 Iowa Podcast Awards in the Society and Culture section. So we're happy to be awarded that, and part of that is because of what we do. And what we do is we have unapologetic conversations about issues facing America, facing the world, facing our communities as they relate to diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging, and racial justice. And so today's conference and the last couple of days have been very, very enlightening, and it fits right into what we do. So we want to thank Tasha and the team for inviting us here. If you see us holding our mics up into the audience out there, we had some audio technical difficulty today, so we are double recording here, using all the technology we can. So listen, y'all. We decided we didn't know what we was going to talk about today. We just knew that we was going to talk.
Actually, we know what we're going to talk about.
We know what we're going to talk about.
We're going to continue some of the conversations people have been having over the last 2 days, because I think Tasha and her team really had their finger on the pulse of what's important for Black and brown professionals and people as a whole. And so any way we can lean into that more. Well, first I want to start, what's been some of your favorite sessions that you've been through?
Yeah. You know, go ahead, Nick.
Well, I kind of like that keynote this morning for some reason.
Yeah.
Who was that? Oh, yeah, Joy.
I owe him $20 too. Now it's my mom. Now that's $40.
So we've had a lot of sessions. Yeah, Nick, what did you pick up in your session?
Well, it was interesting. We talked about...
what was your session?
It was about, the health industry and mental health specifically when it comes to empowerment. And there was a thing that came up in it that I always like to talk about, and it's called safe space. And we always have this discussion, too, when we work with our clients, like, what is a safe space? Who can define what a safe space is? Is it safe for you? Is it safe for me? Right? It's safe for everyone. What I like to say is that's a white fragility term, is what I think of it. When I think of it is we're making it safe so people that look like me don't feel razzled or triggered or whatever you want the word is.
To our audience, Nick is white.
I'm about as pasty white as you can get. What I liked about the session I was in is other people in the room said, well, no, sometimes you have to have those hard conversations to make change, right? And we like to have those hard conversations. I've heard terms brave space, works better. But again, how do you define what's brave for someone? If you suffered from a lot of trauma, being brave might be just the fact that you're in the room. So we like to think of it still as a space. We try not to set up a lot of boundary rules when we have our discussion groups that we do, for that reason. But we still keep trauma in mind, right? We obviously don't want to traumatize anyone anymore. They've already been trauma, or have them rebuild it and regrow it. But we got to be careful using terms like that, because in order for us to get growth and to change minds and hearts, we have to have those hard discussions. and be open to them. So what do you all think?
No, I definitely think that's true. How about you, Anthony? I know you've been.
Yeah, I've been here. So this is a 2-day conference for those listening online, and I have enjoyed I've been going to the economic development conferences because one of the things that when we talk about this Empowerment Symposium, we talk about power. I remember I was having lunch about a year ago with a white executive, and he sat me down and he said, "I got to be honest with you, Anthony. When you got money in your pocket, and these are his words, you can say what the F you want to say." And this is a white businessman in our hometown. His point was not that you can just be a maverick, but economic development means people with power have the power of the purse, and they have the leverage to make a difference in communities. And so I've enjoyed the conversations around economic development. And the first morning session that I sat in on, I thought it was important. There was a mayor from a city in Iowa who was giving an example of how she could leverage her power in economic development. Because one of the questions was, well, if you have this power, what are you doing with your power as a leader in a community? What are you doing with your power?
What are you doing?
And so this mayor gave an example of the community that she was in. They're doing some redevelopment. And in that community, they wanted to make sure there was still affordable housing. Well, the developers wanted to do the high rises and do the apartments and raise the value. And this mayor knew that was not right for the community. It wasn't just about the dollar bill. But that mayor also knew that there were going to be proverbial arrows thrown at her from the naysayers, the investors, and those sorts of people. And so she had to make a moral and a business decision. And she made a moral decision and put her foot down and said, unless we have affordable housing in this community as part of this redevelopment, we are not going to invest. We're not going to, the tax incentives that you need, we're not going to provide those. We're going to respectfully refuse that. And I know that's going to piss some people up, but that is the right thing to do. As it turns out, they not only apparently there were about 24 affordable housing units in this community. They actually increased it to 28.
Nice.
And so I loved hearing that in that session, and I hope that others that sat in that session listened to that, others that have that power, that type of practical power in decision making. So that was fun. That was fun to listen to.
I love that. When you have power, what are you going to do with it? Because so often the goal is to get the power, and we don't think about that. The reason you want the power and the influence is the spaces and opportunities you can create for other people. And so I do think that today has been a central theme. Like some of my favorite part has been about connecting with people today, right? And people, some that I've seen before, we've met before, some that were new, right? But just connecting with people that have somewhat like minds so that we can grow and support each other. But I love that conversation too, Anthony. I'm thinking about when you have the power, how are you going to use it to influence? What are you doing to make it the world better around you? That's so pivotal. And I'm an economic development, y'all know that's my jam.
Yeah.
I just don't think enough people that look like me, especially that look like me and identify as a woman, are involved in economic development. And so often that is what the future of your community looks like. And so how do we encourage that? When I was growing up, I didn't even know that was a thing, right? I just thought buildings got put up because somebody had some money and they decided they were going to put it up. And now getting into development and learning about incentives and all of these things, you want to build communities that have input into how that community is going to grow. So I love that mayor was bold in that moment.
Yeah, absolutely.
So one thing that I thought for sure you would have mentioned this morning, I didn't hear it. I was really shocked, Joy, because we talk about a lot, and maybe it was in the banking session, the finance session, is generational wealth, right? And when we talk about empowerment, a lot of times I know we have that discussion, like how do we get that empowerment? How do people that don't have that power get empowered? And how do we get to where we have generational wealth, right? So, granted, I grew up poor, but not anymore. My parents had a business that worked and they sold it. So, which is different for me. But again, how do we get generational wealth for everyone, right? How do we get it where, it would be nice if our grandkids don't have the same issues and so on. Now, the problem is our grandparents said the same thing, and their grandparents and their grandparents. We got to break the cycle, right? So what do you think? How do we get the generational wealth so that it is equitable and works for everyone?
Cut the check. You all know I always say that.
There we go.
Cut the check.
It's like it fed right into it. Cut the check, right? So one thing I mentioned this morning was, we do a lot of these conferences, and they are so neat and they're great. But when you look around the room at these conferences and you talk to people, what are we doing usually?
Talking to to the choir.
Preaching to the choir, talking to the choir, exactly, right? So how do we get that to change, right? And we've done one. We did one in Cedar Valley that did have some non-choir members, and you hope to change. But if you're coming to a conference like this and you have someone out there that says they're an ally, which no one should call themselves one anyway, but they think of that, bring them along. Invite them or call them out when they don't come and they don't write checks and they don't do things, right? Yeah. That has to be start more called out, especially now with the great divestment, we call it, in DEI stuff. Why aren't there more people that look like me here? I mean, I look around the room at 4, 5, 6, right? But what's the balance of that? We talked about this too, right? The balance is if I come up here, I'm not centering my whiteness. It's still about what it needs to be empowered. It's still about black people being empowered and growing generational wealth and getting away from what historically has been marginalized. That's the balance. So something to think about.
You said something, though, Nick. I might have to, I don't know if I agree or disagree, but this whole allyship word, right? This allyship word, I think, I don't know that I would say people shouldn't use it. The question is really, what does an ally mean, right?
What I say is, I shouldn't call myself an ally. Yeah. If you say I'm an ally, that would mean the world to me.
I like that.
As a white person, I should not be calling myself an ally, right? Because how do I know?
What does allyship mean? What's that mean to you, Joy?
That is a great question. I started this morning, and even when I said cut the check, it doesn't mean go around necessarily and just put money in people's hand, but it does mean access to resources. And it does mean, even when I don't understand, one of my mentors he always says, sometimes, Joy, it's difficult for people to support the things that you do because they don't understand the dance that you dance, right? And in allyship, you have to be willing to not have to understand it. It doesn't have to look the way you think it should look, because somebody and I was having this conversation Sunday, and I were talking about culture. And culture is different, right? And so my culture might be different when I'm making connections with young people that are connected to my culture. And you have to be willing to trust that and say, you know what, I'm going to put resources into what she's doing because I believe in her work, even if I don't understand her dance mix, right? Even if I don't get it, I'm still going to trust and allow her to lead. So that is, for me, one of the most important factors of allyship is not having it, well, I need to understand that 1 + 1 = 2, or 2 + 2 = 4. And I've never quite seen it this way before, and so I can't invest in it. I can't fund it. I won't recommend someone to shop in that bank or that grocery store, or because I'm not used to that. No, allyship means that I'm going to show up even when I don't necessarily understand it. I'm going to be there and support for me.
Yeah, I like that, and I'll piggyback on that. You know, it's about willingness to learn or be uncomfortable in those spaces, and many allies have more power than they think. One of the things that we talked about in one of the economic sessions this morning that I wanted to reemphasize was practical leverage, practical power. If you're in a position where you get to make decisions, like ultimately a decision may land on your desk, one of the conversations we were having is that there's this fear. There's this fear if I make the wrong decision, that not only am I going to get flack from, and I'll just use this as an example, white allies, white middle-aged male allies, maybe want to make a decision in an organization they run around diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, but they feel they're going to get flack from investors or their friends or their business partners that they golf with or what have you. But the other flack that there's this fear of is, I don't want to piss off black people. I don't want to, if I cut the check, was it enough?
Did I get it wrong? Did I give it to the right? Yeah.
Did I give it to the right people? All these things, right? And so my advice to those who are trying to be allies is, when you were a child and you didn't know how to swim, you had to dip in that water and it was not comfortable. So you have to dip into the space and be in it.
We need to start throwing.
And you're not on the outside. You need to be in it. We'll throw some.
We need to start throwing some people in the water.
Yeah, throw some people in the water. That Nick says throw them in the water.
Learn to swim that way.
Sprinkle them. But my point was, if you're willing to make those mistakes, you're willing to make those mistakes in other areas of your life. It's okay to make a mistake here too. We want you to know that.
I got to clap for that. I got to give that some snaps, because in other areas, people oftentimes are willing to understand that a part of growth, they're going to make mistakes. But when we think about our journey with belonging and inclusion, well, that one we can't make mistakes in, right? And so I want to come back to that concept of anything else. If I was looking at career growth, even in your relationship, you know you're going to make some mistakes in your relationship, right? We know that that's going to happen, right? But get used to being uncomfortable. Get used to this isn't a one and done. Get used to, I don't take these 5 sessions and now I'm a DEIB expert. Like I shared this morning, like even as the world is changing, getting used to like, okay, I have to have these conversations about pronouns and I can't make these assumptions, and I have to be open to, like, if somebody calls me in, I have to be open to what that feels like and being like, oh, I made a mistake, and just acknowledging it. And so I love that, because it is really imperative when we have these conversations that people get okay with. Sometimes you don't get it right, and just being accountable for those moments, and let's work forward.
Yeah.
I brought the example earlier because the other story I want to share. So recently with a family member, I had this discussion. They were like, well, we grew up poor, so I know how black people feel. And I'm like, well, no, you know how poor people feel. Right? And we had to have that discussion that you will never know what it feels like to be a black person. You're white. We're white. We grew up white. We have white privilege. And having that discussion with a family member is hard at times, right? Especially in today's climate. But you do it because it's important, right? It's important to change that mind, that thought process, because that thought process causes trauma.
Right.
It causes pain. It causes suffering for others. And I think that's kind of my why we need to get more people at these events that aren't the choir. Right? You need to get people to understand that when they do stuff like that, what it does, and who the group is that has that trauma, and needs to be, I call it equitized, right? Equitized, where there's historical issues at play, and we need to make up for that, right? So I think we had a guest, Caffrey, once, right? And I think you mentioned this a little bit today, right? Like you look at some of these positions that are DEI supportive, and he shocked me. He goes, you know what? Maybe it should be more people that look like me doing it, because we're the ones that caused it. Just a thought, right? So it made me think. I'm like, you know what? There's both ways to it, but he's right. I mean,
well, what about if equities right now? People are scared of DEI.
Like Sherm, you mean?
Yeah. What would you recommend now, though, in this current climate? And I kind of know, but I want us to have that conversation. Grow up, definitely.
Get thrown in the water.
Is there anything either one of you would recommend, though, of when you say, like, now you bring up DEI? Oh, wait a minute, did somebody say a curse word? Like, what would you recommend about that?
Absolutely, and this is important. This is for those trying to be allies as well, or in positions where you've had to hire or acquire DEI professionals. And we've seen what's happened over the last 4 or 5 years, where that pendulum has switched, where there were a bunch of leaders, a bunch of organizations who decided they're going to invest in DEI leaders, and we watched it fall off a cliff, and we knew this was going to happen. And so the question becomes, why, right? And I think to answer your question, Joe, what can the individuals who have those positions of power to hire DEI leaders, what can they say when they're getting resistance? Help me understand why. So pretend we're having a conversation. I'm here with Joy, and Joy's a white woman, and she's decided she's not going to hire a DEI. She looked at her budget and decided, I don't know. We're getting a lot of flack, Anthony, around that position, and what are we going to do about it? Help me understand that flack, Joy. And I say to folks who are in positions of power, do you understand that diversity, equity, and inclusion are 3 different words, first of all? And secondly, they are for all of us, right? Diversity is you, diversity is me. So we are tying it only to black people, but it's tied to women, and it's tied to people of the LGBTQ community. It's tied to people who are overweight, and it's tied to people who are from the South, who live in the North. And if we understand that, I think maybe you said it maybe Joyce said it in her speech this morning, but what's that phrase? All tides rise boats, or whatever that phrase is, right? If we help everybody.
I knew Angie was
Thank you
going
to the audience, to those on.
Two birds with one skyscraper
whatever
in the sky.
That saying is, the point is, if we help each other, we all win, and we're about winning. And so I think there has to be this fear, and I would say to those folks that want to have these conversations, but there's this fear. Top Rank can help you with that. We can help you figure out some ways to say that.
Or can we throw them in the water?
But we can throw you in the water. But I would say one of the things I remember I used to teach telemarketers back in the days is talk to yourself in the mirror. Practice what you're going to say the next day. You heard a conversation and you were uncomfortable. You could dial up a friend and get tips and ideas, but then if you have to literally practice how I'm going to have a conversation the next day, that's okay. You practice speeches all the time, right? If you have to give a PowerPoint presentation, many leaders practice that. So if you care about how to leverage your position of power and how to talk to people, practice it.
And again, I say, because when we but I remember having those conversations maybe 4 years ago around why a business in Iowa has to worry about diversity. And I said, well, do you want to be sustainable? I was working with a business owner and they said, I've been here 50 years, Joy, and I don't know why I have to focus on this now. And my response was, do you want to be here another 50 years, right? Because you need to be able to hire and connect with different people. Again, this morning I said, you don't build a team and go get all point guards, you can do whatever sports analogy you use, but you would definitely get different people for those teams, and that's what diversity is. Now, I will say, we can be unapologetic and understand that there are times where we need to specify, I am going to support Black people, right? There are times when if right now my elbow is bleeding, I'm not going to put a Band-Aid on my toe, right? And so if there are moments where we need more Black support, when Black-owned businesses are behind, that is definitely okay to do, right? And so we have to get comfortable with that. And then again, having that conversation with somebody to say, and what about that? Knowing this information makes you uncomfortable, because then we got to get into some self-awareness and some self-reflection. So that's what I would say too. What do you think, Nick? What did you say in your?
No, I would agree. The younger generation ain't playing. The younger generations. I mean, we probably have every generation represented in here, even though I think the two younger ones ducked out because I was going to call on them. We have this discussion. We were at a company up in Wisconsin, mostly an older generation, manufacturing jobs, and they were complaining about the new generation coming in. And I kind of look around the room and I'm like, well, when you came in the workforce, were you perfect? No. Most of the younger generation, whose kids are they? They're ours, right? So do we owe some responsibility to that? But the younger generation, they're not playing. They care about social things. They care about equity. They care about belonging. They care about work-life balance. They have all these things they care about. I mean, they're not like me. They're not going to go join the military for 21 years necessarily. Or like my mother, who worked the same job for 45 years until it almost killed her type of job. I mean, it's not the same anymore. And we got to adapt, or else, like you said, you want to be in business another 50 years? I'd say you want to be in business another 10 or 20 years, because I think it's coming even sooner. I mean, we talked today about the numbers in the schools around here. It's the global majority is becoming a United States majority as well. It's heading in that direction. It's going to continue to head in that direction. And some of these people, well, A, I kind of hope some of them do go out of business. But B, if they do want to stay in business and they want to do the right thing, they need to start.
So what solutions, if you had to put your finger on a couple of key solutions to leverage, I guess we'll say public-private sector, but leverage the allyship, leverage the public-private sector to grow Black businesses in the state of Iowa, Black and brown businesses here. If you had to put your finger on a couple of solutions.
You got to go to Nick first for that.
I'll get real. New governor.
You went there, didn't you?
I'll go there.
You went there.
The thoughts of our partner, Nick, do not belong to top. No, just.
Oh, sadly they do. Change the power dynamic. I mean, it's And like you said, write the checks.
Right.
Write the checks. Stop the. I mean, if this week it's DEI, next week what's the term going to be? They fight next week. I mean, it's the certain groups in power want to stay in power, and they have this big fear that if some of you all get in power, that diminishes their power, and we got to get past that.
Yeah.
How about you? What do you think, Anthony?
Well, there's a number of solutions. I think cutting the check is always one.
I know you like mine too.
Yeah. I think there's this fear of the P word when we have these conversations, and it's politics, and we never like to talk about it. So I'll take a page from the mayor of Coralville, who mentioned it yesterday morning in one of our sessions. And we do have to have those conversations. And so I'm not here to tell you to advocate for who you vote for. I'm saying everybody has to be civically active and vote.
Yeah.
Right. Everybody knows my personal feeling. I don't have to explain that. You can go on my Facebook page and look at it. But my point is, we're doing nonpartisan voter registration drives because civic duty impacts business, and business impacts people of color. So there's a through line, and the question is, they all matter, right? Public and private partnerships matter. So does the ballot box. They all have to work together. So that's my solution. Vote and be involved civically, and also find ways to balance public and private partnerships.
I would just add that please be an informed voter.
Yes.
If you can.
Yes.
I would say intentionality. Most of the things that I've worked on the past couple years, the most successful models have came from being intentional about what we did, who we were supporting. And I think that's why I mentioned earlier when I was saying, if we're supporting Black-owned businesses, let's say that and let's focus there. If we're supporting Latino mothers, say that and focus there, because it's really hard to move in a direction if we're not focused on who we're trying to serve, right? And so I think that intentionality is very, very critical. I think about when we chose to work with kids around literacy, we didn't say like, oh, well, at this point, we want all kids. We said, nope, the curriculum is for everybody, but in this cohort of kids, we want the kids that are having the most challenges with literacy.
Yes.
Because again, believing what you said, that a rising tide lifts all ships.
I didn't say it right, but I said it.
Angie said that.
Rising, okay, got it. But believing that, we felt like by starting there, that really would uplift our whole community, right? And again, I remember Sharita Stokes, our co-director, I was doing something around technology with kids, and I was so excited. And she put me on pause really quick, and she's like, I love what you want to do, but a lot of our kids can't read. And I had to she let the sail out. I was like, oh, man. And I was like, okay, we got to rethink that then. Okay, so how can we focus where we can bridge that gap? Like my skill set is definitely future stuff, like thinking about tech, thinking about that stuff with kids. But I also understand it's very difficult to get there if you're struggling to read. And so how can we give some lift, love, and light to these group of kids that are experiencing that so that they can get to that next level? And again, we don't do it if we're not focused and we're not intentional. So I think intentionality matters a lot.
I love that you said that intentionality. And this is where the business community, and particularly larger corporations, can step up. I'll give a shameless plug to the Greater Cedar Rapids Community Foundation in Cedar Rapids, Iowa. They embarked about 4 years ago, I think it's been about 4 years now, post George Floyd, on what they called a racial equity initiative. Racial equity. They didn't call it diversity, equity, and inclusion, and they didn't say DEI. They called it specifically what it was. Now I want you to think about that. Think about a foundation who shuffles millions of dollars in a community that's primarily white. Most of their $1 million checks come from primarily white people, and they're having to decide, we need to take a stand in our community about racial justice. And that was a challenging decision for them to make because of the very things I just told you, that fear, and are we going to lose donors, and all of the things that come with a nonprofit that's shuffling millions of dollars. They made the decision, but they did their research behind it. And they talked about why they were doing it. And so whenever they go into any circles in the community, and businesses can do this and individuals can do this, you said it, Nick, informed decisions, informed expressions. They're having conversations with donors maybe who are uncomfortable, but they're having conversations from a place of information. They can put data right in front of you and explain why we need to do this. And those conversations have to happen and not at the expense of, right? Not at the expense of white people, right? Helping black and brown people or helping members of the LGBT community are not at the expense of white people. And that is the gap. I used to wear, y'all know I got this shirt, I used to wear it with the ampersand on it.
Yeah.
It says, and we can do both. So we've got to get around the fear. And I think it's continued talking. And I think those that want to be the allies have to continue to have these conversations, because it can't be just the Anthonys or the Joys of the world. We need more white Nicks to have these conversations in these spaces and be brave about that and be willing to do
safe.
that.
Not safe.
Not
brave.
safe. So that's my solution.
I look around the room, and I think Al just came in, and we've had this discussion where the other thing we got to be careful about, and this is not just with social work in the black community, is the siloing. Right? There's this fear that there's only one way to fix the problem, there's only one way to do it, and I'm going to get all my money, and we're not going to work with any other groups because they'll get our money instead. There's only so much money. I mean, there's LBA does some great things, ASPS, Dr. White out there, your program's up in Cedar Valley. It's about the next generation, right? The kids. And how do we make it better for them? We got to make it better for everyone too, but we really got to make sure the kids are better, because otherwise we don't want to be here 30 years from now saying, well, we're still fixing the same problem. It hasn't really changed. And then 60 years, still the same thing, and 90 years. And the cycle's got to stop. And we see too much siloing. You see organizations are like, well, I'll help a kid till they're 9, then I don't touch them. I don't know where they go after that. They just go away. I take a kid when they're 16 to 18. I don't know where they came from. They don't talk. We don't want to communicate with them and work with them because we might lose our funding and someone else will get it. Again, what's the quote, Angie?
High tide raises all boats.
There we go. Right. So, I just see it a lot, and again, it's not just in Iowa either. I mean, I've been around the United States a little bit, and we got to get over this. This group knows how to fix everything. No other group can do anything at all, and we got to support each other and make it a team. My favorite saying is it takes a village to raise kids, right? To raise the children. We need to be a village.
What would we say next steps are? Because we can sit up here all day and take you all
new
lunch
governor?
to listen to us talk. But I really want to talk about what would we say next steps. You all know, I think that, again, there's an energy in the space and the connections that have been made. And so based off of that, if you all had your choice, what would be next steps? Oh, I stumped you. Good.
Keep momentum. We see a lot of actions, a lot in Iowa, where good things have been done and they just kind of lose momentum. Sometimes it's due to a lack of writing checks. Sometimes it's, for whatever reason, it just loses momentum. I think of, there's things that come up like an inclusive group funded, and then 3 months later, they're changing their name and doing the same thing, and then a year later, and they do some good things in between, but the momentum just kind of dies out. We talked about this up in Cedar Valley with the healthcare stuff we were doing. It's like, keep the momentum going, because people get frustrated, understandably frustrated, right? I mean, people are dealing with trauma. People are dealing with years and decades and centuries of these same problems. Keep the momentum. Right? We can't let it just die out.
I would say a specific practical step. If you're in this room today or you're listening to this online, when it's posted online, I want you to every day have these brush your teeth moments and ask yourself, what can I do in your power to make a change in a policy and a procedure or a process in your organization? Now, what does that mean? Does that mean you may be the decision maker, but you don't have to be the decision maker? You may be an influencer in your organization or in your community. So my solution is, what specific step are you going to take when you leave this conference today? When I see you next time in 2 months at another conference, that you can say, I did X. And it may be like this. You may decide, I'm going to go to my next ERG meeting, my next employee resource group meeting, and I'm going to ask, can we increase our budget? I have some ideas of some things we're going to do, and here's why. Because we go into some organizations and you can not look at their spreadsheet that tells you the number of women and black people and people they have working there, but I want to know what your budget is, because I can look at your budget and tell you what you're doing. And so some of you can begin asking, do you have the resources at your organization? And if you don't, have you ever asked for them? For those who are in leader positions, I was talking to a leader the other day about this conference, and we were having a conversation. And the leader answered their own questions. We were talking about why we have these challenges. And the leader said to me, I'm involved with an organization that helps businesses in the state of Iowa. And I can count on the number of hands, the number of times we've connected it to the targeted small business in Des Moines, right? And I wonder why that is. And I said to this person, I think you just asked your own question.
Answered, yeah.
You identified the problem. You know that there's an organization who can network with the targeted small business. And now you're asking the next question, why? You have the seat at the table. Now it's your job to go find out why. Because we don't have the answer, because people before you weren't going to find out why. So this is what I think you can do if you have power, leverage, and question in your organizations, in your community, and ask yourself every day, what can I do, even if it's small, to make a difference? And it may be that you can't make the change, but you can go question your leader or question somebody else in your organization or in your community. So that's my long answer, Joy.
All right,
How about
great
you?
answer. Intentionality. I'm going to go back to that. I'm saying intentionality. I'm going to recap what you said. So looking at yourself and deciding what it is that you can do, how you can leverage the power and influence that you do have, whether you're in a leadership role, and how we want to define leaders too, because we say leadership role because you can make a decision. You do not have to be in a leadership role to be a leader, right? You can make a decision about internally, I am going to move in certain ways that demonstrate leadership ability and capability. So I always say that too, because sometimes people feel like, well, you've been assigned to be a leader, and I'm like, nope. You can decide that you want to be a leader too. That doesn't. There's no prerequisites for that. Everybody in this room can be considered a leader.
I was just going to say, stand up if you're a leader.
That's right.
Every one of you should be standing up, right? It doesn't mean you might not be the CEO of a company, but you're a leader.
Exactly. And then going back, so your through line was definitely look at yourself, brush the teeth moments, what can you do? And then coming back to Nick's role, Nick said, and then also let's keep the momentum going. Let's not let this be just this 2-day conference, and now in 2 months we see each other and we haven't maybe had an opportunity for an additional touch point, or we haven't done something based off of what we learned today. So I think those are all really, really good skills.
So as we wrap up here, I know we're getting probably close to our time. We want to make sure we're being respectful of time. For those online, we're at a live conference, and we want to be respectful of the time at this great conference we're at. So,
Tasha got the hook.
So I would say, as we wrap up, you got the 3 key solutions, and I would encourage you all to ask yourself what this conference was about today. It was called Empowerment Symposium, right? And it was about empowerment. So I'm going to ask us all to leave today with that word and remember the rest of this day. And as Joyce said, when we see you in a couple months, what have you done to empower either yourselves, your organizations, or your communities? You've got plenty of solutions here. There's no excuses, not just from us, but there's been plenty of conversations and plenty of solutions talked about in these sessions. And so I would encourage that. So, any other final thoughts?
Feel free to email us with any topics you ever want us to discuss. We will discuss anything.
Yeah. Well, we'd like to thank you all. We'd like to wrap this up by once again thanking our sponsors, Rise to Greatness, Imon Communication, Community Savings Bank, Bankers Trust, and Inclusive ICR. So we want to thank you all. Thank you to our audience. We appreciate you all. Give yourselves a hand for the work that you're doing and for staying here.
Our new season will be starting in November.
New season starting.
So we'll be
in
out
November.
digging for sponsors for our award-winning podcast.
So toprankedculture.com, you can catch us there, and you can go to events and see all of our podcasts or find us on YouTube. This will be out live in a few days, and we look forward to you listening and spreading this good word. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, everybody.
Yeah, thanks.
Take care, everybody.